Transplant surgery, considered a far-off miracle a few short decades ago, is today bringing a second chance at life to thousands. Some transplant patients say the surgery itself is the easy part. It's what comes before and after that's the most trying. 13-year-old Katie Resch of Sherwood, North Dakota spent 2 months after her kidney transplant battling rejection with treatments of powerful drugs. She and her mother, Carol, lived during that time at the Gift of Life House in Rochester, Minnesota. The friendships that develop out of shared experiences here can sometimes last a lifetime.
A person that had a kidney transplant about 6 weeks before I did, I stayed in touch with him. And he comes by every so often for a checkup, and when he does, he looks me up.
For Paul Powell, a customer service representative with IBM, Gift of Life brought him support to help him through his kidney transplant experience. It happened shortly after Powell transferred to IBM Rochester, but before he was able to find a place to call home.
Living with an organ, you have to prepare yourself for rejection at any point in time throughout the course of your having it. So this more or less helped to prepare me to deal with whatever might come in the future.
My name's Jayne, Pompeian. I kind of married into Ed's dream. We met each other at Methodist Hospital in 1979, if I can get through this without crying. And I was taking care of one of his friends who was a transplant patient, because that was kind of his social life.
In the 1950s and 1960s, a young Edward P. Pompeian was growing up in the city of Pontiac, Michigan. In his autobiography, Edward writes the following about his childhood. This small town was filled with welcoming neighborhoods where you knew your neighbors for an entire city block. Kids played sidewalk games, baseball, hide and seek, and kickball. It seemed like anything was possible, and I was a happy, healthy boy who enthusiastically took advantage of every opportunity for fun and friendship. At the time, central Michigan had a large Armenian population, and this tight-knit group placed a strong emphasis on our shared traditions, faith in God, and the foundational importance of family.
Ed was 14 years old when he was shopping with his mom, and they would always go shopping on Saturday, but he got really sick. They ended up in the hospital at some point, and they thought, his kidneys, they thought lupus, they really misdiagnosed him, but during that time they met a couple. They kind of gave up, and they had taken him to all of the major hospitals that they could. Mrs. Leto said, if it was our son, we would go to Mayo Clinic, and Ed's mom and dad had not even heard of Mayo Clinic.
A lot of people going into something, when you hear from a doctor saying, there's nothing we can do for your son, a lot of people say, well, that's a medical doctor's opinion, like, okay, this is it. And she just said, no way, I'm not gonna let my son die, and she uprooted her family and moved to Rochester. It took a lot of tenacity.
I was 17 years old when I was told that I was going to have to first be on dialysis and then later have a transplant at some point in time. I felt like my whole life had been just ended at age 17. I didn't think there was a life beyond that dialysis machine, and I didn't know that I'd survive a transplant. I didn't know enough about any of this to make me feel comfortable. And looking back, it was probably one of the reasons why I visited patients at the hospital every day, to try to allay their fears that there is life after transplantation.
He would visit all the transplant patients. He would find out who had had a transplant. There was no HIPAA. Try to help them understand how things went for him as far as recovery and if they had questions, how things, how he dealt with it. A lot of times they would ask, it's expensive, we have to stay quite a bit of time here in Rochester, and so that was always a question, where do you stay, how do you take care of all of that? And so it was just kind of ongoing question, and so in the back of his mind, it was always wondering what could he do to help these people.
I shouldn't say any normal person, but a lot of people would just have given up early on, and said, this is my lot in life, I'm gonna be sick, I can't do this. But if he would have had that attitude at any point in his life, maybe I wouldn't be here, the gift of life wouldn't be here, it's hard to imagine, what life could have been.
That cut your first week of hunting, little short pop.
It did.
Can you see that weedy patch right over here? See where the weeds kind of a darker green stick?
Hey, I'm Grant Woods. I'm a wildlife biologist and I live near Branson, Missouri. I've had a kidney transplant 32 years throughout most of my career as a wildlife biologist.
Better white oaks not to burn and leave. I want to kill all the cedars in here.
When I was a child, I was raised here in southern Missouri, and I had heard that they were going to restock deer in the area. There were no deer. I'd never seen a deer. And then I was out on the farm a little bit. It was a cold morning right before Christmas. I still had to go to school that morning. And I found a female fawn in one of our fence rows that a poacher, a lawbreaker, had shot and left. And ever since that moment, I've really disliked lawbreakers, especially people that do that on wildlife or natural resources, and I've just been passionate about white-tailed deer.
So, I mean, there is some newness to that.
I had a condition called reflux. The valves in my bladder got cocked open when I was a kid. In my case, maybe due to strep. I had severe strep when I was a kid, and it can settle in different parts of your body. And once that was diagnosed, I would go to the Mayo Clinic every 6 months to kind of check on my kidney health. And I knew I was going to have a transplant someday, but they kept saying, it's in the future, it's in the future. And I got down to about 7% kidney function. I was waiting for the doctor to come to his office, and he'd come in and still the normal greeting. He'd sit in his chair and pull it up about 6 inches from my knee. And I knew what he was going to say. And he said, Grant, it's time. You need a transplant or you're going to die. Tough blow for a young man, right?
Real estate man Ed Pompeian knows how lonely and expensive it can be getting a transplant. During his own experience, Pompeian came to know other recipients like him, whose life-threatening situation was compounded by financial worries.
There really wasn't any place to stay for short-term 2 to 3 month stays. Apartment buildings didn't want to take patients for short-term stays. So we stayed at the Holiday Inn because that was the only thing available to us at the time.
The cost of lodging alone, when added to the cost of transplant surgery and incidentals, can seem overwhelming.
Those things were all hard, right? In addition to the difficulties, the challenges of leaving your family behind, going to this unknown place, having to navigate where you're going to live, how that's going to work, the expenses. He knew some of that, because we'd always been told, most people have things from their childhood, and he had nothing because he had tried to help the family out by selling all his toys, right? Just getting rid of all of his baseball cards, because he felt he needed to also make a contribution. So that itself is telling, right? I think having had that experience as a kid, it gave him a different perspective as an adult.
In 1973, he received a kidney donated by his office manager, who also happens to be his mother.
Yeah, she gave me life twice.
And so I think he understood that suffering isn't one that just the kids face. It's one that the family, it's like it's a larger trauma, it's a larger challenge. In their case, he had to live separated from his father. His dad stayed in Michigan, the rest of the family left. They didn't know anybody in Rochester. They didn't really know what they were doing. At that point, they didn't know why he was sick. They were just looking for answers. It was friends, extended friends. They weren't family members who had told them to come to Rochester and go to Mayo to try to get another opinion for him. So I think he he had such compassion, but lots of kids, you just see the world differently. And so I think he was seeing what was happening with him through his mother's eyes, and that itself was painful. But he was also trying then in that sense to kind of be a positive force for her,
True.
to help her get through the suffering she was experiencing, watching her loved one, her own kid, struggling and suffering through the illness that he had. Because they were very close family. They all lived with all of their extended family in what was, really an immigrant community in Pontiac, Michigan. And so that was a massive separation, because even as a child he had lived with his grandmother, so they had like a multi-generational household that was all split apart by the sort of the health crisis that he experienced, that his family experienced.
I mean, I could start when we met at the hospital. He would come and visit his friend, and then they would go out on pass with Ed at night. I just said to him, I said, it's not fair. You guys go out every night. The least you could do is bring us a bag of popcorn. Well, so Ed never did anything in a small way. Barlow's had a popcorn machine, and he came back with a large black garbage bag full of popcorn, so that was our first date.
Hi, I'm Nick Pompeian.
And I'm Rochelle Pompeian.
And this is Nadia Pompeian.
She's 3, and this is Lydia. She just turned 1.
Wow, you're good. You saying hi, you're not camera shy. I'm the third son of Ed and Jayne Pompeian, so Ed being the founder and my father of Gift of Life Transplant House. And so obviously Rochelle and I are married, and these are our 2 children, the next generation of Pompeians, if you will. So obviously the Gift of Life Transplant House has been a huge part of my life, and I would say our life. I remember as a young child going there, as long as I remember, to be honest with you. And I think for me personally, the house represents a few things. It represents family, it represents hope, it represents love, and it represents community.
Okay. Yeah, I even remember the day we got together for this picture. Here we are almost 40 years ago, and we're in front of the 624 Center Street house, the original house. And so there's Ed Pompeian, and he's flanked by Mary Davy, Greg Warner, and myself. And then I was a transplant surgeon. And so Ed had this vision of doing something to help patients. He had this vision, which my first thought, and I think I said it to him, I said, oh, well, Ed, that's not going to work.
It wasn't ideal either, because one of the transplant patients committed suicide, so he knew that there had to be a different way of them coping with their transplant and just having support and everything.
Ed Pompeian personally knew how hard it was for patients and families to relocate during the lengthy transplant surgery and recovery process, and decided to build his own organization to help others receive affordable transplant housing. But there were several huge obstacles. For one, Ed didn't have the money.
We didn't have any money, so we just kind of went on a wing and a prayer when we found if we found a place, how we were going to pay for it. And of course, he was in real estate, so he knew a lot, bankers and all those kind of people in town. And so when we found the house, and we both, it was like walking in and saying, this is it. And they were selling it for $100,000. We didn't have $10.
Ed leaned on his skill set in real estate, reaching out to as many people as he could find to try to communicate and share his vision with them.
He went to Mayo, and they kind of didn't have a lot of trust that we could do this. And so they said, okay, if you can get this up and going, we'll pay the last $10,000 of your mortgage.
So I kept thinking, boy, I need to do something. What I did was I went around town and I basically begged for money for people for this dream that I had of starting a transplant house. I had no idea what a transplant house should look like. I just felt that there needed to be something.
It didn't take long before the 624 West Center Street home became fully occupied with guests.
That was kind of the beginning. 8 bedrooms still wasn't enough. So we still had people stay with us. So we kind of were the spillover, or when there wasn't enough room at the transplant house.
He needed not just volunteer support, but he knew that he would be more successful if he had Mayo behind his project.
And there's not a better place in the world than the Mayo Clinic to have your hopes and dreams come true.
My name is Greg Warner. I'm one of the founding board members of the Gift of Life Transplant House. One day, I think it was Mary, came up to me and said, "Do you know Ed Pompeian?" I said, "Well, yeah, I met him a few years ago. Why?" "Well, he wants to put together a transplant house, and we need some people to help us with that. Would you be interested in helping out with that?" And I said, "Sure, I'd be happy to," not understanding exactly what we were in for, but I said I'd be happy to do that. And I remember having lunch with Ed a couple times, and I could tell he was really excited about doing this, but it felt to me he needed someone to push him over the ledge. And as we talked about it, it was like, "Ed, you're gonna do this. You know you're gonna do this. Just say I'm gonna do it rather than just talk about it." And so he did, and I mean, the energy and enthusiasm and commitment and the leadership he provided in those early days were just astounding. I mean, I think he single-handedly went out and raised the down payment for our first transplant house, talked to hotels and motels about donating furniture for that house. He was just tireless in his efforts to get this thing going.
Another obstacle was Ed's own health. Ongoing complications and issues from his misdiagnosis in his youth, combined with a routine of difficult dialysis procedures and immunosuppressant drugs, were hard on his body, causing serious issues that led him to need a hip replacement and a triple bypass surgery, along with muscle pain, weight gain, and fatigue, all of which threatened to derail the project continuously and put his own life in peril.
My understanding is that the dialysis experience was vastly different than it is today. And so I think Grandma was the one they were doing dialysis at home. Is that right?
Correct. And Grandpa, like he learned, and Sharon actually went to nursing school to learn also how to help dialyze our father at home. And of course, medicine has changed a lot since, the 1970s, 1960s. And people still can do at-home dialysis. What hasn't changed is the impact that dialysis has on the body, right? It's an exhausting process, and you are stuck to this machine for 3 hours, 3 times a week, and then you still don't feel that great. You get all the poisons out of your blood, but you feel exhausted. Like you still don't really have the quality of life that people that are healthy have.
We understood that Mayo Clinic had helped houses like this kind of get started. And so I was charged with going to Mayo and saying, would you help this transplant house? But when we explained where we were and what we're going to do, they said, sure, we'd be happy to help out. You have a mortgage, we'll pay the last $10,000 of your mortgage. So they weren't going to, and rightfully so, commit money to us unless they knew we were going to keep moving forward.
I can't imagine dealing with a very young family, a growing business, and a growing nonprofit organization while also having to deal with serious health issues. Because as my dad had a lot of issues, all of them essentially stemming back from his misdiagnosis from his first transplant. With that came other things such as issues with his heart. My dad had triple bypass surgery, multiple heart attacks, hepatitis C, which they were able to take care of later on in life. And then, yeah, he had another transplant then, because eventually the original kidney was from my grandmother. Eventually, I guess things got tired.
Grandma, his mother Helen, gave him life twice. And I think Dad, you know, when there is so much uncertainty, you embrace and you're extremely grateful for the gift of transplantation, because it allows you to not be tied to a machine 3 days a week. It gives you the energy and the flexibility to have a life. Yes, there are side effects of the anti-rejection medications that we know long-term can cause negative effects. But I do think that when you go through the transplant process, receive a transplant, and it goes well, that it changes you as a person as well, because you have been given this second chance.
It was probably in the spring of 2004, and we were actually heading towards our cabin on Lake Pepin. We would do it often, and kind of out of the blue on the drive over, my parents kind of said, you know, Daddy's gonna need a new kidney here soon, and you know, it's his one that from Grandma has been failing, and you know, no pressure, but you know, we need somebody to donate the kidney. Would any of you kids be interested? And at the time I was, I think it's 18, and so myself and my older brother Ed were the ones eligible to get tested to see if we were good matches. You know, at the time you're kind of thinking, oh gosh, what in the world, like. But my mom always likes to tell the story when I was younger that I was the fearless one, being second oldest. You know, even though I had an older brother going in for shots, I'd be the first one to raise my hand. Let's get it over with, you know, kind of thing. You know, and looking back at it, I guess I was pretty fearless. I never let anything bother me. I guess I get that strength a little bit from my dad and from my mom. And after my older brother and I decided we would get tested, we had the tests done, and the test came back, and I was the best match. And it's interesting because I've always felt like I've always been told that I was closest looking to my dad when the test results came back, and Aaron, you're the best match. Do you want to do it? I had no hesitation. Anyone in this situation, I would think that, you know, having an opportunity to save someone's life, especially someone so close like a father, would do it.
And on December 28th of last year, 2004, my 20-year-old son, Aaron, donated one of his kidneys to me. That was difficult for me. Didn't want to have to ask a child to do that, but the doctor decided that it was the best, and my son insisted on being the donor, and he's doing fine. He's a sophomore in college, and yeah, I would do it again if I had to.
I always like to tell this story because it's pretty poignant. After the surgery, I was wheeled out of the operating room, and when I was waking up, my dad was kind of in the same room but away, and he saw me, and the nurse said, "Well, do you want me to wheel you over to your dad?" And I said, "Of course," you know, and he had his hand up, and he said, "Aaron, how did it go? Aaron, how did it go?" And I said, "Dad, it was a piece of cake," you know, and that's, I mean, looking back at it, you know, sure, it was a surgery, a major surgery, but what came up out of it, and you know, the recovery. I was a young kid at the time, so the recovery was pretty easy, but it gave 15 years more life to my dad. And every year on the anniversary, he would always ask me, "Aaron, would you do it again?" I said, "Dad, I would do it again in a heartbeat. Of course I would, you know." I said, if I had another kidney, I'd no doubt in my mind.
The original house at 624 Center Street, I think, had room for 8 guests, and that quickly was filled up, and so we were using rooms at St. John's that had probably been used for staff or priests or nuns. And so we were able to rent those rooms until this building was ready for guests.
In 1984, Pompeian, together with a group of dedicated volunteers committed to helping organ and tissue transplant patients, established the first Gift of Life transplant house in downtown Rochester, just blocks from the Mayo Clinic and its hospitals.
Yeah, we have this friend who had a kidney the week before Jeff, and his insurance will only pay for him to stay at the Kaler. And you know, he gets bored and lonely. He's been coming to stay and visiting with all the people, visiting with us till like 9:30 at night.
Here, financially, again, it is much less money. Plus, I have the opportunity to buy some food and eat in, and it keeps you from having to spend a tremendous amount of money in restaurants.
Patients and family members pay only a nominal nightly lodging fee, which helps cover the cost of operating the home. But savings is just part of the benefit of Gift of Life.
But I don't know, I can't describe it. It's just been great. I was kind of apprehensive, and you know, I don't know these people, but you know, they all, hi, how you doing? You know, what are you here for? And
it takes you away from yourself and helps you kind of throw yourself into somebody else. We find ourselves, even the other day, Kathleen and I were talking to one of the other housemates, and her daughter's in having a bone marrow. And every day we ask about her progress, and we talk to her mom, and we're her support system because she doesn't have anybody else.
I don't know how we'd have made it without it. We could not have lived here for 3 months in a motel.
I'm Charlene Dietz. I go by Char, and I'm from Illinois. Ended up with T-cell lymphoma cancer.
How many years ago was your stem cell transplant?
It will be 11, July 19th. Was my second it was my second birthday. So no, I am so thankful. I tell you, God has been so good to me, and these doctors have been just absolutely wonderful. Well, when I knew I was going to have the stem cell transplant, Dr. Witzig said he recommended Gift of Life. And so we took the tour, very nice, and I thought, oh my, living in a big 48 rooms here, cooking in the kitchen with all these people, I don't know. And I thought, no, sure, you with God's help, you can do it. And there was no alternative. So, so that's how I ended up coming here and staying. And while we were here, it was so different than what I thought it would be. It definitely is like a home away from home. And the people were so nice, and cooking in the kitchen with these people, you get like family. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's like family. I just always look forward to coming back. I just wonder if they ever have long-term volunteers. And so when I asked you, and you said, well, yeah, we've never had it, but yeah, that would be. So I thought, you know what, this just sounds like something I would like to do. So I moved up here, everything but the kitchen sink on this efficiency apartment. And I start working in laundry, and it was just, and everybody was so nice. I mean, the employees, the staff, I just fell in love with the place.
How many years have you been coming to Gift of Life?
Well, it's probably been, in December it will be 12 years.
That's incredible.
In 1984, I don't think we realized how quickly the transplant program was going to expand, and expanded for several reasons. One was new immunosuppression came into use in 1984 and 1985. It was called cyclosporin.
Hello and welcome to Medicines from Around the World. Today we're going to talk about cyclosporin and the miracle of transplantation. And I think without a doubt, cyclosporin has been the greatest drug discovery of the last 25 years. It was actually discovered in Norway in a soil sample, very similar to this one.
It really made the results so much better and the complications so fewer that the transplant programs took off. Also, the establishment in 1984 was just a year before we started the liver transplant program, the heart transplant program, And as I said, the bone marrow transplant program was going full blast and increasing as well. So the pancreas program came along a couple years later. So this was a major increase in the number of transplants Mayo was doing, and thus it engendered the need for more space for guests.
And alongside cyclosporin are a whole range of other new, different immunosuppressive drugs, which will carry us from this to the next century.
It's always no money, no mission. So scrapping for the money. And, you know, I think we all kind of tapped into the people that we knew that could give money. Patients were very generous early on. And you can see that even today with the walls that we have recognizing donors, that patients and their families recognize what a gift the Gift of Life Transplant House is to the patients and their families and their support system. So, you know, all of that kind of, again, I keep going back to, it was all about Ed. I mean, yes, he had a lot of support system. His family carries on the tradition today, which is very nice to see. But I have a hard time thinking that this house, the transplant house, would be as successful as it is without Ed's leadership and his commitment to this.
There's Sister Marjory. Here she is again over here. We were so lucky to have her.
Sister Marjory. Sister Marjory, 1, 2, 3.
If you want to spell it. As the house was growing in the early 1980s and the mid 1980s, none of it would have happened without Sister Marjory and Sister Jayne. And Sister Marjory was herself a huge figure, and she, I think, was instrumental in trying to get a whole lot of money raised. She was a go-getter in that sense. She had experience working and mobilizing people in a common cause to try to get big things done. So in many ways, Sister Marjory, as anyone who knew the history of the transplant house would understand, was really sort of the companion to my dad's vision, because she in many ways was the person on the ground executing things.
I always looked at her as like a motherly figure. So, and she was really the face of Gift of Life. She really made the whole place just run. I mean, really. Strong, caring, compassionate. Like, I guess more so in a grandmotherly way, in some respects. Organized. I mean, to be able to, and to have a vision, to take my dad's idea of what the Gift of Life, what he thinks it should be, and then to make it happen.
Sister Marjory was a unique person, and you never would have thought she was a nun, maybe until you meet nuns. And then I think you would understand better that she had this fire, she had this passion, and in that sense, you know, she was what you would expect. This incredibly strong, incredibly motivated, hardworking person, and so she was a force to be reckoned with in a lot of ways, and it was really sad then, you know, when she died and we lost her, because she had done so much for the house for so long.
Yeah, I just remember you don't really want to mess with her because this was how it's going to be. But looking back, she did an excellent job to help create Gift of Life to what it is today. I mean, she ran that house extremely well.
I think when Sister Marjory and Sister Jayne came, they really, you know, put the first layer of brick to the foundation, I think, and really organized and established, you know, what a transplant house should be.
Our youngest one that we've ever had has been 5 weeks old, who received a liver on the day before Christmas.
Well, today is a day to say thank you to everyone who's donated money or furnishings for the home. The ceremony is about much more.
It's the people. We're not just a place to lodge people, but a place to really care for people's spirits.
It didn't take long before the 624 West Center Street home became fully occupied with guests. Doctors told Mary Davy about the noticeable difference the house was making in the lives and recovery of patients. Although this had been a huge leap, the demand was only growing as large numbers of patients and caregivers were still unable to find stays in the limited guest space of Gift of Life's original 624 home, and the board felt compelled to expand. The opportunity came in the form of the Judd House on 2nd Street, where a wealthy Georgian colonial home had been built in the year 1911 for highly regarded surgeon Dr. Judd and his wife Helen. Helen Judd had later deeded the property to the Mayo Foundation.
Mayo saw this as a real good partnership because patients were coming from all over and they had difficulty staying in the normal hotels and motels. And hotels and motels really didn't want them because they were so ill. They were happy to have them out.
Because of the overwhelming and continuing demand, another Gift of Life transplant house is needed. On any given night, 10 or 20 patients and families are placed on a waiting list to stay at the Gift of Life house. The new house, located between the Mayo Clinic and St. Mary's Hospital, will provide accommodations for 36 patients and their families, and is designed for both short-term and long-term stays. This historic home needs to be remodeled and expanded to meet the needs of its guests.
We're not handicapped accessible where we are. However, our new facility will be a 36-room facility, which will be completely handicapped accessible to all areas of the building with an elevator in-house. This will allow us to meet the needs of the ever-changing medical environment, where patients are getting out of the hospitals earlier and having more severe needs when they are leaving the hospital.
The big challenge in our view is to replace or to extend the residential feel and homey character of this building so that the patients that are coming in here have a sense of home and of comfort.
Gift of Life is seeking $1.5 million to offset the cost of making this new home comfortable and suitable to the people who will, for a time, call the Gift of Life house their home.
The Gift of Life Transplant House now, since its most recent expansion, is able to welcome 48 patients along with their caregiver.
I think it has a huge impact in helping people adjust to a difficult time.
The house offers something for everyone. All interests and all ages are able to relax, unwind, and get to know others who've walked the same path.
We all work out the plan and the story for us. And then we have people along the way who help us, who encourage us.
And as many leave the house today with a beautiful plaque thanking them for their generous gift, they leave more importantly knowing that they've helped make this house a home for hundreds of people who will certainly need the extended family the house has to offer in their time of need.
And people that are concerned, by and large, get picked up by someone who's been there and who tells them, well, this is what it'll be like, and it'll get better, and have you tried this, and it's going to be okay.
This is a place that it's just such a neat community, and it's like a family. If anybody could even come in and look at this place and see what it's all about, I would hope they would be generous enough to consider giving a little bit of help.
With your help, we can make the new home a reality for transplant patients and their families.
That's all great. You can get good results by broadcasting. And we broadcast this in again in August, late August, with a full summer crop in here.
My transplant went really smooth and I recovered without issues. At that time, I did not know about Gift of Life. So I've seen Gift of Life from both sides. Did not have a lot of financial assets at that time. So I was staying in this really, really ratty hotel, horrible, cooking meals on a little hot plate, trying to save money. And later in my transplant journey, I learned of Gift of Life. Again, this was decades ago. And so I kept that first kidney 25 years. And finally the meds I'm on, of course, the meds can be damaging and cause some issues. And I lost that first kidney after 25 years. And at that time, my 19-year-old daughter, Raleigh Woods, gave me a kidney, saved my life. And we had learned about Gift of Life, heard about it from other patients. And so we went there, and it was such a blessing. I've experienced a transplant without having the atmosphere and the cleanliness and the support of Gift of Life. And I've experienced a transplant with that support and everything that goes with that. And there's no comparison. I am such a huge fan, medically, mentally, spiritually, of Gift of Life. I can't imagine the untold number of lives they've touched and people that have had a better transplant outcome like me because of the resources at Gift of Life. And I've lived my life. I've been to New Zealand working in the field. I've been to Panama. I'm in the field all the time. My dream was to be a deer biologist. I've had a beautiful career of that. My wife and I own and live on a ranch for wildlife, not captive critters. We just managed a habitat for wildlife. We've raised 2 beautiful daughters and really involved in their life. So family is everything to me, just short of my relationship with Jesus Christ. And I think if you're so blessed to have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, then these things really aren't scary. And I stay there now. I go back for my annual checkups. I was just at Gift of Life recently, and I'll see people that I met along my journey, or the staff, Mary and her staff, and I really feel like it's a homecoming. When I go to Gift of Life, I get a little teary-eyed, and it's a homecoming. It's a place that I associate with very, very positive experiences. Not painful, but very positive, very uplifting. And you see other people that maybe aren't doing quite as good as you, and you see other people that are just doing great. And that community aspect, we all know how important that is for whatever adventure we're in life. But when your health is on the line, that extremely supportive and uplifting and sharing something in common community is as important as any other medicine that's involved in the recovery of a transplant.
The one thing about my father is that not only did he not worry too much about life, and I had asked him, some things before he had passed, and he said, Aaron, I just did it. I put it in God's hands and I just did it. I didn't worry about the what ifs, is this gonna work? Is this not gonna work? And, early on, when they bought the West Center Street home, it was $100,000. I mean, so at the time in the 80s, I think that was pretty expensive. And he didn't have the connections that he had, 15, 20 years on. But he met a lot of people through the transplant process that he connected with, that he knew he could rely on. I mean, I think right at the beginning, it was kind of like, is this going to work? Is this going to happen? But it just evolved from there. And I think it is a testament to the people that my dad met and the people that saw what he had envisioned and could say, yeah, let's get on board with this.
I think he was just amazed, that things worked out for him, for the transplant house, and we would drive down 2nd Street, and we would drive down, and when they named the house, he said, can you imagine, could you ever have imagined, that 2 houses, when it started 8 bedrooms, or they were staying at our house or at his mom's house, and then, he always had health issues too, but, he just kind of always, he just got through them, whatever he had to do, so he'd also always say, because of his bad health, and that brought him to Mayo, Rochester from Michigan, everything good happened, so.
Today, after 30 years of growth aimed at helping more families, Ed's Transplant House looks like this. 2 large buildings with 87 guest rooms and moral support beyond measure.
Gift of Life is incredibly important resource and option for our transplant patients. At a time of very critical need, both emotionally and medically, they have a place to call home. It helps them have the absolute best outcome they can.
He was such an amazing individual. And I'm so fortunate to be able to call him Dad. Despite everything that he went through, he was able to be successful in his business life, in his with the nonprofit Gift of Life, and most importantly, I think he would say with his family. And he succeeded in all those things despite being told that he wouldn't be able to do those things. You know, he wasn't supposed to have children. They just thought it wasn't going to be possible with all of the issues that he had had. He had 4 kids. You know, my dad always chuckled when he had after his first transplant, he was going to school and he wanted to be a microbiologist, and he was doing an internship his first summer after school at Mayo, and they were concerned because he was immunocompromised that he shouldn't be dealing with all these microorganisms. They didn't know if, God forbid, something happened, how his body would respond. So they basically said, you can't do this. And my dad, you know, he didn't know what he was going to do with his life then. So he stopped going to school. And he said one day he picked up the paper and saw that there was a wanted ad for real estate agents. My dad loved telling everybody this story because I don't know who would do this, but I guess in the office, they were voting on things, and one of the things was the least likely to succeed. I don't know why you would do that in the office. I think that really lit a fire under my dad, like a lot of things. He ended up, I would say, probably being one of the most successful real estate people, and probably was the only one that was around. And once again, I think that shows the resilience of my dad. He was told that he wouldn't live past the age of 14 years old. Well, he did it. He was told that you're not going to be successful in business. Well, he did it. I'm sure he was told about the challenges of starting a nonprofit and how hard it is. Well, he did it. He was told time and time again that there's these challenges, and he always rose above those challenges. Once again, I think that just shows the character and the individual that my dad was, and a lot of that was faith in God and God leading him down this path. And my dad had a very, very, very strong faith, and that helped him really, truly get through the hardest of times, and his faith and, like I said, his family. I mean, those were the 2 biggest things. And so that's what the house is built on, right? It's based on that faith, that hope, that love, the family. And I think that's something that resonates with everybody, which the next 40 years, I see the mission just continuing to grow.
Gift of Life Executive Director Mary Wilder says this project was made possible by a donation from an anonymous family covering all of the costs. She says when this renovation is complete, Gift of Life will now have 3 facilities that can provide housing for patients.
If the house isn't full, obviously it could be overflow housing for other guests at the other houses if we're full there. But this, we're looking forward to lots of children out in the front yards running and playing and happy, and children recovering and receiving that wonderful gift of life.
And to continue to build on that legacy of hope and love and family that Dad set out to do way back in 1984. And this is going to be a lasting thing for generations to come.
Somehow, Ed was always optimistic. When we were concerned, somehow he came up with the money, maybe some out of his own pocket to keep things going. But as I mentioned, this idea of helping patients in a very practical way was attractive. And I remember the donation of the land for the present big house across the street on the south side of 2nd Street was from a transplant patient who was from the United Arab Emirates, and he donated that land. He was a successful kidney transplant patient who saw the benefit that the Gift of Life House did.
Going through school, I didn't expect to go into transplantation, but it just happened to fall into place that way, and it was one of the best decisions of my life, because I tell people my job is not a job to me, it's a passion, and I love working with the transplant population because they are special individuals. They go through a lot. And like Ed was saying, transplantation doesn't just stop at the surgery. They have a whole life now of having to take these medications twice a day, 12 hours apart, that helps prevent rejection, but we know that they cause other comorbidities. And it's very challenging because we see it. We see the heart disease, we see the cancers, and we see all these disease processes that occur from end-stage renal disease and from taking these medications. So it doesn't stop at the surgery. It's a whole life. It's a whole transition. And I thank my patients and I praise them for doing the best job that they can.
Later at a banquet and awards ceremony, News 10 talked with Wonder Woman Linda Carter. Carter became involved in the organ donor program when a close friend needed a liver transplant.
And you kind of have to wait for a liver to be available, which means someone has to die, which is a horrible thought. But if it were me, I would want part of me to live on and help someone if it were possible.
If you can't be at home, this is a place that you really do need to be. Just develop a closeness here.
She knows the story. You don't know how to tell time. And a truck.
Some people are in a lot worse shape than I am, and I'm somewhere in the middle there waiting for a transplant, whereas some of these people, they're waiting for multiple transplants. They might have heart, liver, kidneys. How much did you used to weigh, John?
220.
220, what are you down to now?
175.
175. That's 45 pounds, huh? I think we can put some of that back, build up some muscle tone, make you the lean, mean machine you was. Yeah, it kind of started when when I first got here. He'd been here a couple of months and was undergoing treatment for leukemia, and he's just a champ. You don't hear him complain, which you don't hear from very many of these people. They're not whiners or snivellers, and if I can help in a little ways, maybe somebody will help me when I get out of surgery to motivate me.
I'm Brad Stokes, and I had a liver transplant in August of '94. So it's just past the 5-year mark, which was a major milestone. When I was first transplanted, my son was only 3, and my big concern at the time was that he wouldn't remember his father if I didn't make it at that time. And so now he's 8 going on 9, and I've had those 5 years to really be part of his life.
Laughing at my mistakes.
After the transplant, I thought that I might only, come back 50%, and that I would be severely limited. And I was really pleasantly surprised to find out that, I can play golf, I play racquetball, I work hard, wrestle with my son, do all these different things.
It's not often in our current day that we get to see people receive miracles. But at the transplant house, we're able to see people receiving those miracles on a daily basis.
I think illness can be a very lonely place, and nobody should have to go through it alone. And people feel very proud to work here, to be associated. And as a sister of St. Francis, I'm very proud of that legacy. People come in and they're like pulled apart at the seams. And some of them show it. You kind of see the stuffing all coming out, and they're very ragged and the whole thing. There are other ones who kind of hold themselves in very perfect, but they're all hurting.
You don't get that in a hotel. I'm a hotel guy too, I own some hotels, but the patients belong here. Whenever there's a need for the transplant house, I'll be here.
In July of 2019, we came together, which we're really grateful for, to get this family photo from, with the banner celebrating Gift of Life's 35th anniversary. So this is actually really special because Dad ended up passing away probably a week after we took this photo. So this is the Pompeian family in 2019. It has since grown and will continue to grow. So, but yeah, we I cherish this photo.
You know, every year on the anniversary of my father's death, we get together and have a McDonald's cone, because that's what my mom and him would like to do. Once a week, my dad would substitute, you know, his glass of milk or whatever it is for a McDonald's cone, because his doctor said that, you know, there's similar sugar amounts and stuff like that. So they would go do that, you know, and my mom would always tell people the story about how sometimes they'd just go in their pajamas and say, let's go, and hop in the car. So every year on his anniversary, we'll go get a McDonald's cone and sit on the lawn of Gift of Life and have ice cream and talk about our father and his legacy. And
well, it sure brightens your day. If you're having a down day or something, you come over here and you talk to the patients and you see what some of them are actually going through. And yeah, it makes me feel wonderful. I can't believe it. I can't believe it. If you had told me that you'd be having a 48-bedroom facility 20 years ago, I would have said no, or 30 years ago, I would have said no way. I can't imagine having done this. And it's just incredible how God's work really did the work. I have to say, it was his soldier.
It's important, you know, only one of my kids, my oldest Henry, was able to meet my dad, but all my kids know about it. You know, it's always gonna be important that be like Papa, you know, give like Papa.